Hey there, I'm Scott, and this is Tangents. Well, it is the 1st of February 2023, which is just, I know I say this every time, but it's just mind-blowing how fast time goes. A blink ago, I was in Japan. A blink before that, I was thinking about going. A blink before that, I was living in Paris. And, a blink before that, I was living in Hawaii. And now that's been upwards of 20 years, which is, it's just maddening. I mean, it's stunning. So, what I wanted to talk about today, uh, I mean, I have lots of things that I keep thinking about. I have a whole list of topics that I want to get onto. Many of them have nothing to do with this, but I keep coming back to, well, in addition to other things, ACAB. All cops are bastards. And it's not that I think every person individually is an evil, terrible person, right? It's not that I think, your father, your brother, your sister, your cousin, your uncle, whoever you know who's a cop, your neighbor Bill, they may seem like a great person. They might even be a good person. They might have good intentions. They might overall, like, they might have joined the police force thinking that they were going to help. They might have joined thinking, like, I see how fucked up things are, and I'm gonna get in there and change things. And the problem, and I'm not gonna like beat a dead horse here. I've talked about this a lot, but the problem is fundamentally that the system will not allow them. The system makes them bastards. And I think I've been reflecting a lot on like what that means and how it works, and I because I understand the tendency, like when I make a generalization like that, you're like, oh, but Scott, it can't be all cops. All cops can't be bastards. Um, and yeah, it's true. They're nice people in their lives. They might not even be the person who puts puts their knee on somebody's neck. I'm trying to say, but they may very well and probably are the person who will sit to the side and watch that happen and not do anything. They might not be the person who tases somebody to death, but they probably are the person who will hear people like joking about that kind of stuff and not say anything, and not do anything, and not push back. It's it's not even necessarily a condemnation of them as individuals, or I'm not saying that they're immoral, or intrinsically bad people. I mean, I think one of the thoughts that I have here, and I think I, I'm trying to synthesize all of this, so I've got a lot of different stuff that's kind of coming in from different angles, and I'm just trying to make it into a coherent picture. So one of the things that I've been doing recently is, I mean, I watch a lot of YouTube, and on that, somehow James Baldwin comes up a lot. I've seen him, I've listened to him, I've read a little bit of his stuff over the course of the years, but somehow recently it's kind of clicking a little bit more. And today I was watching an interview with him and Dick Cavett, and it's kind of fascinating and kind of horrible in the sense that I think this was from like 1969. Maybe it was 1967, but whatever it was, sometime in the 60s, Ronald Reagan was the governor of California. And they're talking, and there were certainly certain things in like how they were speaking. The fact that he's smoking on TV probably wouldn't happen today. The fact that Dick Cavett is sitting there using not the standard N word, but another N word that I wouldn't use to refer to black people. And there are things like that that have not aged well, let's just say. But other than that kind of stuff, like the broad strokes, the ideas in the conversation, a lot of the problems that were addressed, are the same problems we're having today. They talked about the police. And James Baldwin sat there and said, like, yeah, I'm sure there are some good cops. I'm sure that Nixon loves his kids. But they're still bad. The people, this is the problem, because I understand, this idea that somebody has done something horrible, turns them into a horrible person. And it very well may mean that, they are habitually horrible. But there's something to be said for just, we all do things, we all benefit from, I mean, when I say we all, I mean certainly like cishet white dude like me. You think about it, and I mean literally just by virtue of my existence in this country, I've committed, I would say, essentially a crime. And I don't mean that I personally have volitionally gone out and done something horrible, but my existence here on lands that were stolen from other people long before I was born, long before my ancestors even came here. I mean, it's kind of funny. I've talked about this before, but I had a friend in graduate school, and she made some kind of offhand comment about how recently her ancestors came to Hawaii and came to America. And she was doing this in contrast to me, with the assumption that like mine have been here for so long. And I don't remember how many generations back hers went, but it was a lot. And it's kind of funny because my dad's parents came here from Spain. My mom's parents came here from, I think, Germany and Ireland and maybe France. I'm not even sure. Don't really care. But just a few generations back. And, so my ancestors were not here in the times of slavery. And I've not received generational wealth directly from that. But at the same time, and I'm not even saying my life has been perfect. I'm not saying that I've never faced hardships. I've never, experienced suffering, or, I've obviously had lots of problems. But even with those problems, I have been the beneficiary of being a cishet white dude in America my entire life, with the exceptions of the times that I've been out of the country briefly. But even then, yeah. And I really think part of the problem and part of the reason that we have not moved past, it's horrifying to see how little we've moved since the civil rights era, and since, frankly, the end of the Civil War, the abolition of slavery, with an asterisk, that little asterisk in the 13th Amendment that slavery is abolished, except, it's a little weird thing to put in there, but I'm never going to get past that one. But nonetheless, we have not gone that far. And I think there are things that we could have done, certainly after that, the Reconstruction and all of this. To be fair, I'm not a historian, but it does seem like people were trying to take us in a certain direction, and then there was a kind of slamming on the brakes of that back then. And then in the civil rights era, there was an attempt to move us in a certain direction, and slamming on the brakes then as well. And I'm certainly not saying that things are no different, because obviously they are. But at the same time, things are much more similar than they should be, given the time scales. Now, I do understand, just like I keep saying, like it's a blink and it's 2023. Things do move slowly and suddenly, slowly and then all at once. That is a thing. But at the same time, I think part of the reason why we're still here and why we haven't gotten past this is it's really hard to just reckon with the things that, and again, not that I've done it personally, but I've still benefited enormously from racism and from racial disparity. and from, sexism. I mean, you get all these, oh, not all men kind of people. But the thing is, yeah, you may be one of the good ones, but you're still benefiting from it. You're still, and also, I mean, this was an interesting thing actually. Going back to this Dick Cavett interview, Dick Cavett is talking with James Baldwin, and they're going back and forth, and you can tell Dick Cavett, is kind of on the right side. I mean, he like thinks in a certain way. He's kind of relatively enlightened, but at the same time, just unwilling to accept certain realities and unwilling to accept, and I think this is part of why these realities have not improved, because if you don't accept them and you don't face them, you can bury stuff forever in principle, but it's still there under the surface, right? You're not actually fixing the problem. I think this is one of the reasons why talking about reparations is just off the table. Like, people just don't even, because I mean, first off, if you calculate that bill, it's a significant amount of money, it's a lot of money. And people, granted, some people are just not so introspective and they're not really aware enough to be able to realize what they owe. But even the ones that do, to some extent, they're sitting there going like, shit, that's a lot of money. Maybe I'll just pretend that I don't owe the tab and just kind of dine and dash, so to speak. And it's not just financial reparations, which again are significant. And I mean, like in terms of generational wealth, both of my parents left, well, my mom is still alive, but she has no wealth really. And my dad, other than whatever savings he had, got burned away. I mean, granted, this was decades ago, but our healthcare system still burned it away. And he didn't have that much savings to begin with. So it's not like they left or they're leaving me a lot, but there's still this benefit that I get simply by being, a cishet white dude. I get into rooms, I get into positions that I wouldn't have otherwise. Certain doors are much more open to me. And Dick Cavett also had this guy on there. He was a professor. Don't remember his name, but it was Weiss, something Weiss. And he's sitting there, and they kind of framed it as a debate with him and Baldwin. And the guy's like, well, I agree with a lot of the stuff that you're saying, but you're really oversimplifying things and you're reducing all of this to racism, and that everybody has, it's stuff that you've heard before probably. Everybody has problems and all this. And yeah, it's true. Like I said, everybody faces hardships, everybody faces challenges, everybody faces problems. But this thing is there and it is omnipresent. And we're not dealing with it, and we've never dealt with it. And that is why it continues. That is why we can't get past it, fundamentally, I would say. And I think all I could think when I was listening to this guy talking was just how much this is exactly why we are where we are. This is exactly why no one will ever address the police. This is why, me saying all cops are bastards gets so much pushback. It gets, saying defund the police. Defund the police is I would say, a conservative, like frankly, rational, reasonable, calm, measured, obvious thing to say. The police in this country, and I know this because I just looked it up, we spend something upwards of $200 billion a year on police, on law enforcement. If that was a military, it would be the third largest military in the world. After China, who is something like $280 billion, so a little bit more than we spend on the police, and us, who are like $800 billion, more than, I think we're more than 3 times, or at least order of 3 times what China is spending just on the military. Our police force, that big. And in terms of population, it's not like the US population is, it's not like you scale it up. I mean, China's population is a little bit bigger than ours. And the fact that we're in this country that claims to be so interested in freedom, in upward mobility, and all of these things, and yet we have so many people in prison. We have so many people not even any longer in prison, but they've lost the right to vote. They've been disenfranchised permanently for things that multiple presidents have admitted to doing. Yeah. I mean, that is a fucked up thing, and we never address it. I mean, and you don't even have to go, like, let's say we don't want to talk about race, which I think we have to talk about, but let's say you don't want to. How about the environment? Okay? I don't think anyone would disagree. Trump, horrible asshole, sat there, I mean, you have, what is her name? Palin, the drill baby drill, and all this kind of shit. Yeah, the Republicans are terrible. But the Democrats are just as fucking bad. And yeah, okay. Well, Scott, they care a little bit, or they pay lip service to it. Well, yeah, but they're still going to leave us essentially digging up and burning every last drop of oil we can get out of the ground. It's like we're going to become carbon neutral at about the time when we can no longer have a choice. Like fundamentally, that's pretty much the trajectory we're on. And you think about that, the consequences of that are going to be enormous. And I mean, we will probably, in our hubris, resort to some kind of geoengineering or something horrible that ends up fucking us in a different way. But the amount of carbon dioxide we're going to put into the atmosphere, the amount that we already have, but the amount that we're going to, is going to have a lasting impact through the last bit of habitability of this planet. Like, naturally, the planet is going to become uninhabitable in not even, I think it's like a 500 million years, depressingly. It's not even that long. In that time, we're going to still have the footprint of the CO2 that we're putting out lasting in the air. Unless we pull it all out, which we may do, but let's assume not. And we're going to have, like in that time, significant increase in global temperatures because of that. Now, I do think we're going to have another sort of supercontinent and then glaciation event, potentially, and then that ends. But it's still going to be warmer than it would have been. It's still going to have, a shadow from humanity in this little sliver that we've got here. And that's the fucking Democrats. I say ACAB, or I say defund the police, or reduce military spending. You put it in a way that doesn't sound so objectionable. Maybe stop pissing away so much money on law enforcement. You say stuff like that, and the pushback that you get, it's like you said, just let criminals go out and rape and pillage. Like, and when I say that, I mean, like, not even with exaggeration. That's not hyperbolic. The response people get to you saying that is of the same kind of caliber. And it's funny because I'm a person who does research and I look into stuff. If you actually look at it, and I've talked about this before, and I'm sorry to beat a dead horse on this, but the police really do not increase safety. They do not do anything to deter crime. They basically do nothing to protect us. And they certainly do protect property. That's what they do. That's what they're for. But you're no safer because there are cops. In fact, especially depending on the color of your skin, you may be worse off because there are cops. If you look at civil forfeiture, more things are legally stolen by cops than by criminals. That's the situation that we're in. And we spend so much fucking money on this. Like both LA and New York spend, I think, upwards of 10, 11 billion dollars a year on police. And again, does not make them safer. It does not make the cities more livable. The funny thing is also, like, it's not funny, it's tragic. But the things that actually do make you safer, that objectively have been shown to make us safer, are things like investing in education, investing in improving people's quality of life. And I mean, you go to places where people live in shitty circumstance, and actually, Baldwin was talking about this in a different thing that I was watching. I forgot about it, but he was talking about, you go to his word, the ghetto, and people would be there, and you see like how rundown things are and how shitty they are and how nice they are in other places, and you start feeling like, oh, maybe we do suck, you know. Making things better, making things. I mean, it's a weird thing actually. Um, we have this thing with gentrification, and in reality, you would like to think that, and it should be, frankly, that taking places that are kind of run down and shitty and improving them should improve them for the people that live there. And instead, what we're doing is, of course, pricing the people that live there out and getting them pushed out, and other people are kind of taking over those spaces. But in another world, in a better world, what you would be doing is raising the standard of living, raising the quality of life for people in places that have been historically impoverished. And that would be a way to do this, and that would be a thing to, I don't know that we're going to. Just like, I mean, I do think at some point in the future, we'll probably figure some stuff out, maybe. But you look at it and it's like we're gonna wait until we've exhausted all other possibilities. You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've exhausted all the other possibilities. Yeah, it's depressing. So I'm holding this because I had this this quote that he said during this Cavett interview that I thought was. He had a lot of things that he said that I thought were pretty relevant. But this one, like twinged to me. It gave me a little particular resonance. And I think, I'm not sure if he said public or republic. I think it was republic, so I'm going to use that. But when the republic reacts, as it did to the linking of two words, power and black, it is a confession of what the country has done with its power. And I feel like, there's something there that, I mean, it's obvious at the same time, but it just kind of tells you, like, how much you're sort of saying, like, oh, black power is scary. Well, why? Because, white power is, you see what that means, and then you kind of think about it. It's a thing that you're telling on yourself. And I think there's something about that just, it's like, wow. But anyway, I don't want to dwell too much on it. I do think it's worth looking back. And it is kind of, I do find it interesting that you can go through stuff that somebody before you were even born wrote or talked about and see it and read it and all of this. It is a power. It is one of the few things that elevates humans above the rest of the animals on the planet. Just that we have the ability to not just have like learned animal traditions, but we can actually have the thoughts of somebody who has been dead now for like 30 years or more. They can resonate with you. They can affect you. In a really real way. Like, I mean, these are things that he said and wrote down, and you can read them. You can hear them. I mean, it's not just that recent. I mean, you've got like Shakespeare or the Iliad, or however far back written history goes. There are things that people who have been dead since before European contact on this continent wrote down that you can be affected by. And for most of the history of this planet, that has not been the case. I mean, even animals with brains very similar to ours, if they didn't know someone in their lifetime, the effects would be blended away. Like, now maybe a particularly smart ape figured something out and people started copying it, and then they would keep replicating that for generations, but you wouldn't know, oh, it was Bob who figured this out, or it was Susan 4 generations ago, and she saw this situation and wrote this and said this. I do think, I mean, because we have that, it's kind of weird that on one hand, hopefully it gives us the ability to escape from this kind of nightmare that we've created for ourselves. And on the other hand, it's part of what allows things like this to be so enduring, because the entire concept of this country, the documents that make it, the history, all of this, the fact that that stuff is all written down and exists and people are passing it on is part of why things can't change, but it's also part of how things maybe can change. So I don't know. And I'm not saying that we'd be better with everybody illiterate. I think the ability to touch back and hear someone else's thoughts and see the mistakes people have made and the triumphs they've had and hopefully learn from them. I think that's important. And I do hope, and I think, looking back and seeing Dick Cavett, who, again, I think, and he's still alive, is the crazy thing, but he's sitting there and he's like on the cusp, I feel like, of a realization. He's on the cusp of just an acceptance, but not quite there. And I do hope that maybe I, or maybe you, maybe somebody, hopefully not too far from now, goes back and sees that and then, makes that next little step, make that next little realization. And that could hopefully be the start of some progress. I don't know. And when I say the start, I mean, obviously, like, things have been progressing for a very long time, but it's depressing how little they have. And I do think a big part of that problem is that we're not accepting, we're not accepting how much we benefit from stuff. We're not accepting responsibility, and we're not looking at how much the people who, I mean, how many people before, when Trump was in office, a lot of Bernie people would sit there and say, those liberals are going to go back to lunch and get their mimosas, and they're just going to forget about stuff. And they did. And it's a problem, because Biden is a horrible, wretched piece of shit. It's funny that both, in this time when policing is obviously such a problem, not that it's gotten worse, I mean, it's just that now we have a little bit more of a light on it. But the president and the vice president are both people who built their careers on imprisoning people and fucking people over and destroying their lives. These are the people that got nominated. There's almost, I'm not a conspiratorial person. I do think there are a lot of things where it's kind of like conspiracy without conspirators. It's the sort of thing where, it's not that there's some dark organization pulling the strings behind the scenes. It's just kind of, there are a lot of people aligned in their goals and desires, and they end up doing this. But the net effect of being in this moment of history, and the nominee for the party and the vice president nominee were, and I'm not, to be fair, I'm not saying that Kamala is as bad as Joe, but the thing is, it's like, she's bad, Joe's worse, Trump is worse, but they're still, on an absolute scale, pretty fucked up. it's not that they're bad people. Like, I'm sure, just like the cops, I'm sure there are some nice things about them. I'm sure, they're decent people and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, they're also not. I mean, um, it's a problem partly, I think, because it's hard to separate what people do from who they are, and it's also, you know, and even Trump. Like Trump, I'd consider to be a pretty horrible person, but to some extent, like he's horrible because of the circumstances that he grew up in. Like if you had his father and his life story, you'd have trouble being a normal, well-adjusted person too. I'm not saying you would necessarily be as bad or as much of a like wounded narcissist as he is, but it would be hard to go through that life and not have, not do a lot of terrible things. And I mean, you look at Biden, and I'm sure if you go through, you can find, oh well, he struggled in school, so then he started plagiarizing, and then that's what it doesn't excuse it. I'm sure you could come up with explanations like that, but he's still a fucking plagiarist. And the thing is, it's not that I think he's an intrinsically bad person, but just like Trump, the fact that you do these things and never make the realization that they were bad, you never change the behavior, you never try to make amends or do anything about that, that's what makes you a bad person. It's not the stuff that you did, which frankly was pretty fucked up. The crime bill, making it impossible to discharge student loans. He wasn't alone in that, but he's responsible for that. And you can go through his career. The plagiarism should have ended his career. The whole like creepy Uncle Joe with the hands on, just makes your sphincter clench. You see all that, and sniffing the hair and all that stuff. That stuff is bad, but it's the lack of remorse, the lack of reflection, the lack of any kind of attempt to improve or to make amends. That's the part that is, I would say, unforgivable. Now, granted, maybe at some point in the future, if he was going to live to be 1,000, he would realize, but it's not going to happen. Like, he's probably going to go to his grave, just like Trump, and never get better. And it's sad, and I'm not saying that you write people off necessarily, but it's kind of who they are. Kamala, you're like, okay, well, I understand. You were a black politician at this time, and this was a way that you could kind of build your career on the backs of a bunch of other people whose lives you destroyed. You can understand the circumstances and why you do the things that you do, but it doesn't make it okay. And the fact that she does not come back and go like, oh, I fucked up. I made a mistake. I know why I did it. And in the time, it seemed like the right thing to do. And maybe it's even part of why I am here and in the position that I'm in. But yeah, I mean, could you imagine if she said that? But it's never going to happen. I just don't see, she's at least younger, so maybe there's a chance, but you just don't see it. And it's kind of depressing, because I feel like, I think a lot about, I've talked about this too, but sorry I repeat myself. But there's the commencement speech at Stanford by Steve Jobs. And in that, he's talking about how death is one of the most important inventions of life. And he's just sort of talking about how, like you live, you go through your stuff, you die, and then you get replaced by somebody else. And it's very depressing, because especially considering that, like, I would like to live indefinitely. Yeah. But also, there's some truth to it, because it's like, well, if you, and it also, frankly, scares the shit out of me. I've said this many times too, but if you imagine Peter Thiel, if he was actually able to live indefinitely, with the resources that he has. Like, there's some medical breakthrough, and or even Steve Jobs. But any of these horrible fucking pieces of shit, Trump. Could you imagine if he was able to? Musk or Gates, or you just go through the fucking list. Any of these people, they're already essentially, like kings, right? If they were able to live indefinitely, they'd essentially just be gods. Demigods, at least. I mean, they'd be in a position where they just are untouchable and elevated impossibly ahead of the rest of us. I mean, it's a dystopian nightmare, frankly, to think about. The Kochs, after these two fuckers die, I guess one of them is dead, but after they're gone and buried, a century later, their shadow is going to dim the world, like truly. Now, it is true, all of our, the footprints we leave behind do eventually wear down and disappear, but their shadow is that long. And, you think about it, if they would have had this magical gift of being able to live indefinitely, you'd be fucked. Like, you see how much harm they've caused in the time that they've, in the decades that they've pushed things a certain way. Imagine that they could keep going. The country, like, the democracy already is, on the ropes, to say the least. It could very easily get knocked out, to the extent that we even ever had democracy. But, what we do have, that semblance of it, it's just, ready to be washed away. And if you imagine they had that power, they were still around and would be, you'd have no hope. I mean, and I'm not saying there's never any hope, because obviously things would go on for thousands of years, and then eventually maybe something would happen, but it would be a very long time. And it's depressing, because we're on the cusp of getting into that kind of a situation. And it's like with automation. If you imagine we had automation that could basically do any of the jobs that we do, and I think there's a lot of stuff, like AI is overblown. But that being said, we're at a point where it's kind of an engineering problem to automate away most of the work that people do. And you think about that, and that technology could completely eliminate toil. It could put us into essentially utopia, where we have unlimited resources, effectively. I mean, obviously there are certain things, like you only have so much beachfront property, but you'd have essentially, for most reasonable resources, an unlimited supply. And, things could be basically free. Things could be very comfortable for everybody. We could all live like people in ways that wealthy people once couldn't even have imagined. That's a path. Or you get Elon Musk having that kind of technology, and then basically being a totalitarian and taking all of the little bits of work, just like Bezos took all of those mom and pop stores and squeezed every dime out of them and funneled it all to himself. Now you could do all labor and funnel that all to yourself and impoverish everybody. That's the other path. Now there are other things too, but I think you look at where we are, and I hate to say this, but I think that second one is more likely, and it's kind of horrifying that we're on the cusp of that. And I don't know. I hope we don't go down a dark path. I hope we get things, like, finally accept some stuff and move on. It would be nice to not burn up all the fucking gas. It would be nice to actually confront all of the racist history of this country and actually do something about it. It would be nice to do something about the police and the military-industrial complex. It'd be nice to not continue to roll down this hill that we're going down. To stop and say, okay, enough, and let's fucking change course. I hope that we do it, because the alternative is not good. And I understand, part of the problem is, of course, you're a cop, you're a Democrat, you're one of these people who you think is a good person. And you sit there and you're like, oh, well, at least I'm not like these other horrible people. And at least I'm sitting here trying. Well, kind of, yeah. But, you're supporting Joe Biden. You're supporting Harris. You're supporting all these people doing terrible things. And you're supporting the police. You're sitting there going like, oh, well, we can't defund them. We've got to just put more money in there so that we can get more training. And, like, as though this was a thing that we've never tried before. Like, how many fucking times do you have to make the same mistake? And the horrible thing is, you're comfortable where you are, and you're like satiating yourself by going like, oh, well, I went to the march and I did this thing and I signed the petition online, or I did whatever. I voted for Biden and all this stuff. You say that stuff to yourself, and that satiates you, and then things just keep getting worse and worse. And also, I mean, like, it's a horrifying thing that Trump could easily run in 24, lose, like literally lose the popular vote and the electoral college, and then become installed into office by some state legislatures. And, oh, by the way, he controls the fucking Supreme Court. They could let him in. They could say like, oh yeah, this is totally constitutional. This is totally cool. That's a thing that could happen. And if it does, it is 100%, like, and I'm not saying he doesn't have blame for it. Obviously, like, it's his fault, and it's, but it is 100% on the fucking Democrats for doing nothing and letting it happen. And frankly, it's on you if you're sitting there and you're comfortable and you're not sitting there screaming at Joe Biden. You're not calling these people up and making their lives, a little bit hell. Demanding that they do something. Now, I mean, now it's kind of too late, because we no longer have the House. So that was a great fucking thing to just, let slide. I mean, you want to talk about racism. Jeffries, who I don't like, I think there are some arguments that he's worse than Pelosi, which is a hard thing to imagine. But it's funny that Pelosi waited to give up her seat and give it to him until he was the minority leader. Couldn't have him be the actual Speaker of the House. She gave it up when it's like, oh, well, I fucked up the car. Here, have the keys. That's great. And not that he would not do any worse than she. So I'm sitting here like, I'm torn, because both of these things are horrible. It sucks that he's I was going to say the speaker. It sucks that he's the minority leader. And it also sucks that he was given that role. I mean, he's been like sucking her ass for all these years, waiting for it, just biding his time, building soft power and getting, his fucking grimy hands on everything and emulating her. And yet also, like, even with all of that, she gave it to him when, it was already fucked up. Man, the whole situation is so dumb. And then this will be the last thing I say, but you have all these people who I still kind of like inherently, like AOC and Omar and Rashida and all these people. Like, I look at them and I kind of like and respect them, but at the same time, they all voted for Jeffries. They all voted for Pelosi. They're not pushing back. They're not doing, and it's the same problem, of course, because just like you're comfortable with things as they are and letting the Democratic Party do these things without any pushback, they're comfortable in their situation, and they're also sitting there just like the cops, going like, well, I'm a good cop, but I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to be the nail that gets pounded down because they stuck out of the board. I don't want to be, and you see that and you're like, well, this is not a good situation, because if people don't do that stuff, then things just keep going and they keep getting worse. Things never are going to improve if people don't stop them from going down this path. I mean, it's, I hate to say like the throw yourself at the machinery kind of situation, but essentially now, I mean, we're in a position where that's what it takes. Like literally just destroying the machinery, or we're just going to keep going down, and you can see where it's going to go. And it's not any place good. It's not a place that we want to be. So anyway, with that, I think I'm going to go work on something else. But thanks for indulging me. Actually, I will say one more thing. I watch Simon Whistler a lot, and I'm a huge fan of his stuff. I like it a lot. Maybe it's the accent, I don't know, but he does seem very thoughtful. He seems considerate. He's got good writers. Everything seems cool. I enjoy it. But today I was watching one of his things, and he made an offhand remark about how defunding the police just sounds kind of stupid. And it just, I mean, I wrote a letter to him, so I'm sure probably not going to get heard. Although one of his writers did respond to something I posted on the thing, so at least somebody saw it. Thank you, Kevin, by the way. I'm sure you're not going to watch this, but that being said, it just is painful to see. And I mean, I talk to people too, and they're like, oh, well, maybe ACAB isn't the right messaging. It's like, yeah, I understand why you think that. I understand why you think defunding the police is not a good thing or not viable. But the problem is that, yeah, ACAB. Yeah, the situation is such that people, even if they want to be better, the system will not allow it, right? The funding for these fucking people is so much that all of these cities are funneling so much money. Again, the third largest funded military in the world would be our police force. And yet saying maybe we should cut back a little bit on that, maybe, and especially like when you look at the situation and you see like things are not getting better. No amount of training is helping. And in the training, they do things like, oh, well, while you're shooting or after you've shot, you should say like, put your hands down, do not, and you give them the orders, whoever you happen to be shooting, you should comply. And then people who are watching that remember the order coming before the shooting, because their brain can't make sense of things being in reverse chronological order, because they don't make sense, because they don't realize that, oh, it's a fucking trick to make you think that they did the right things. And yeah, I mean, you just look at this and it's like, it's so frustrating to me, because this is a fixable situation, just like so many other fucking things. Universal healthcare. Healthcare in this country is fucked beyond belief. Higher education in this country is fucked beyond belief. And yet these are things that are fixable. These are not like insurmountable problems. In the course of human history, we've dealt with things that are bigger than these. And yet, people like me are sitting here saying like, do this and just help a little bit. And instead of helping, you get all these people going like, oh, well, I'm not going to put a little hand and make light work of that. I'm going to just sit there and go, what you're saying, Scott, shame. The way you're saying it, you're using, you're just like, what the fuck? And trust me, it's not just how I'm saying it, because I've used the more reformy language in the past before I realized like the actual scale and scope and horrible situation that we're in. It doesn't work either, which is one of these, like, it's kind of the same way that I'm actually glad that I campaigned for Hillary after Bernie lost in 2016, and I'm glad that I voted for her because it didn't help. I don't mean that it didn't help her win, but I mean all of these people who wanted to beat the shit out of me for being for Bernie. And why was I for Bernie? Well, because I look at all the rest of the world and I see how much we spend on healthcare and how shitty our outcomes are. I see how much we spend on education and how shitty our outcomes are. I see how much student loan debt and medical debt and all these things. I see how little upward mobility we have compared to other countries that don't have the myth of the self-made person and all of this stuff. I see that and I'm like, maybe we could do better. And the amount of shit that I got from people for that, and the amount of shit that people gave to other people for that, it's stunning. And yeah, and then like you're gonna tell me, oh well, if you worked in the system and you did, like no, it's not that I've not tried, okay. But anyway, with that, I'm frustrated, and I would just beg and plead with you that you help a little bit. Just get out and push a little bit. That's all I'm saying. Don't push in the wrong direction. Just like a little nudge. Vote for Biden if you have to. I did it. But make his life a little bit fucking miserable. Give him a little fire under his ass. Like, don't just sit there and go like, well, Scott, why are you being such a dick to Biden? He's just giving the oil drilling rights to these companies. And, why is that so bad? He's just saying fund the police, Scott. Why are you being a dick to him? It's like, he's just saying that if he got universal health care on his desk, he'd veto it. Why do you want to be a dick to him, Scott? Like, are you for the Republican? Like, fuck that shit. I hate it. I can't stand it. And it doesn't move me anymore. I have to say, that's the other thing. Like, you can say that shit as much as you want. I know it's bullshit. You know it's bullshit, I hope. Knock it the fuck off. Because it's not pushing me, it's just irritating me. And what else is irritating me is that you're sitting there and not pushing things with me. I'm out here sweating my ass off, pushing, trying to make progress, and, pushing the other direction is not helping. Not helping is not helping. So anyway, with that, and I'll tell you something else, like, not pushing the Democrats is part of the problem. Because they know they can get away. They know I'm going to vote for those stupid fuckers. They know they can give me Biden or somebody equally horrible, and I'm going to vote for the bastard. And, and again, it is partly my fault, I have to admit. Because if I was the kind of person who would say, just fucking pull the trigger and hit the kid, shoot the hostage instead of negotiating with the terrorists. If I was that person, then I might get listened to a little bit more. But I'm the good soldier who sits there and reliably does the shit that I'm supposed to do. And I get fucked for it. I don't like it. I'm done with it. I'm tired of it. So anyway, that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much. Let's say Jen.